In today's episode of Hållbarhetssnack, I'm going to talk to the CEO of Xynteo, Osvald Bjelland. We're going to discuss how corporations can adjust their growth model to a more sustainable one, and Osvald is going to share some of his thoughts on why sustainable growth is the only way forward. Welcome to the show, Osvald.
Thank you very much.
You're the CEO and founder of Xynteo. First of all, could you briefly explain to me what is it that you do at Xynteo?
So we work with large global companies to help them grow differently, and that's our mission.
Okay, and why did you start Xynteo?
So I felt at the time that the world needed a new idea. I felt that the traditional sustainability approach at that time had a lot to offer, but basically when I looked at the world at that time, and I have a specific experience in India, where I was asked to give a speech to the Tata Group. And after I talked about sustainability, one of these bigger-than-life figures came up to me and said, Oswald, how can you talk so much about sustainability when people don't have milk on the table? Mm. So basically I realized, and I realized also perhaps before, that it's not only about sustainability in a narrow sense, but we actually need to reinvent our growth model so people in India and elsewhere can get what they need to live with dignity and to live in better ways.
Okay, yeah. So basically your company helps companies reinvent their growth model into a more sustainable one.
Yeah, so the challenge for more or less every company today and for society at large is that our growth model, even though it has served us extremely well in the last many decades, we have at least three problems. The one is the conflict between human and nature. The second is the conflict between the few and the many. And the third is the intergenerational short and long term. What do we leave behind when we leave this to those who come after us? Mm. What does that look like? So those are the three challenges that every company is facing, and all of us. And we try to work on very practical activities to solve some of those towards that mission.
Yeah. Could you give me some examples of companies that you've worked with in the past?
All of us have some kind of emotional connection to who we work with and what we work on. And we also have a long-term view. So more or less all the clients we work with over the long term. Mm. Companies, we work with Unilever on plastic. We work with Scania on biofuel. We work with the Scient in Hyderabad on distributed healthcare. We work with the Shell on the energy transition, etc. So these are the kind of companies we work with. We work with MasterCard on financial inclusion.
Big corporations.
Yes.
And when did you start the company?
In 2001.
Okay. I'm interested in knowing if you noticed a shift amongst business leaders' attitude towards sustainability. I mean, in recent years, sustainability has gained a lot of attention, both in the media, amongst investors, and nowadays almost all the companies have a sustainability manager. Yeah. Have you noticed a shift since you started?
So clearly in 2001, there was still an enormous debate. Is climate science really trustworthy? Is climate change actually happening? I remember at the time I hired a chief scientist, a Princeton professor, who helped us having that debate around the science and helping companies to understand that. I think this is more or less all, at least in Western quoted advanced companies, is no debate anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's a massive shift.
It's a massive shift.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But do you feel this might be a difficult question to answer, but do you feel like this increased interest in sustainability comes from a genuine desire to actually make the world a better place?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, because you see, like, global business and government and more or less all large institutions have a trust problem today. But personally, I meet many fantastic leaders in business who are deeply concerned and who do practical things to address the climate problems and also to work on inclusion and basically advance the societies in which they operate. So my answer to your question is, I think it is very, very genuine among many. But of course, in more or less all industries, you find those enlightened leaders, and you find also the others.
Yeah, that are using it simply as a marketing strategy, greenwashing.
For sure.
Yeah. So we're talking about sustainable growth. Could you, as the CEO of a company that works with companies trying to achieve sustainable growth, pitch this to me? What exactly is sustainable growth and why is it important?
Yeah, so for us, there are like 3 or 4 elements here. First of all, we need to realize that if you run a business, times are changing. So for example, when I worked as a young man in the US in the 1980s, total quality management was like the key word, and because of the Japanese car industry outcompeting the European and the American industry. Today, of course, there are totally different questions, and sustainability at the core of more or less every company. So that's like one starting point that when we talk about what we do. The second is, okay, what can be done? What do we do to help with this? First of all, it is about leadership. You can't unlock change in a company unless the leaders wake up to a new reality and see how to bring the company to relevance. And then some very few companies are able to take their own leadership to a new level, to change their organization and then change their industry. So the one is leadership. The second that we work on is to build coalitions that really can help drive systems change. So like India 2022 is such a coalition. If you look in Europe, we have something called Europe Delivers, where we have engaged a number of Europe's top business leaders in seeing how you can drive change in Europe. And then the third in my pitch to you is that you need to do very bespoke, practical transformation. And those are the 3 things that we work on. And of course, this is supported by a fantastic team, which is like qualified, deep expertise, and we use catalytic tools to drive this change.
Isn't it also like sustainability is literally the only way forward? Because without a world, we won't have any business.
So I think that's a great comment, and I can't imagine that an unsustainable business can last for very long, at least for 3 reasons. One is that the customers goes away. Second is that the financials will not work. And the third, you will not get the great people to work for you. So this whole agenda of sustainability or like future fit growth is something of survival importance.
So how can businesses align their strategy with the Sustainable Development Goals framework?
Yeah, so that framework brought forward by the United Nations has, I believe, helped many companies and many countries. Like I just see, for example, one of the goals relates to the ocean. And I see in my country, our Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, is now leading the Sustainable Ocean Economy Alliance. It's a coalition of enormous importance going forward. I think if you look at the company level, companies like many great Swedish companies like IKEA, Volvo, Scania, but also like Unilever, MasterCard, and many of these companies are very committed to help us meet those sustainable development goals. And it materializes in very specific objectives. Like, for example, Unilever has committed to cut their plastic with 50%. If you look in IKEA, they have committed to run all their warehouses on renewable energy, etc., etc. So companies are doing very practical things to change their business.
But this must be a very complicated and complex process. What have been some of the greatest challenges that you encountered when you've been working with these companies trying to incorporate sustainability into their business model?
Yeah, so of course this is a massive shift because for many different reasons. First of all, many of the problems we work on are systemic in nature. If you look at the plastic in supply chains, if you look at the water system, if you look at the energy system, healthcare system. So many leaders and companies have no training or a limited background in analyzing systems and intervening into systems to unlock new growth and change. So that's like a pretty profound challenge. The second is that, of course, most people in organizations are trained and they are incentivized to optimize the current model rather than transforming into a new model. And that's the case in more or less every company that we work with. And then third is that in some industries, of course, it is much more difficult than in others. If you are, let's say you are the CEO of a steel company or a cement company, it's not self-evident how you transform them and make them more sustainable.
No,
that's a huge challenge and it's difficult. So I think that we need also to be quite tolerant in moving forward, that as long as people try hard and really honestly try to transform, we should cheer them along the best we can.
Are you optimistic? Do you believe that this change is going to happen?
So I think there are many challenges and there were many problems to solve, but I am optimistic in small and bigger ways. I think that we will see lots of positive change, even in a country which is a wonderful country like America, where you see the overall leadership at the moment, which is quite discouraging. You see an enormous amount of innovation at the city level and at the company level. So people sometimes are much smarter than their leaders.
Yeah.
They are just leading on and leaning forward and trying to drive the change we so desperately need. And it's blindingly obvious the challenges we are up against on television and science reports every day.
Yeah.
So I think people pick up on this.
You briefly mentioned India 2022. What's that?
So India 2022 is an initiative that we have established together with 11 companies where we try to address some profound challenges in the country. So Prime Minister Modi has put up a number of objectives for the country for 2022 when they celebrate their 75th anniversary from the British, independence from the British. And we work on 4 specific challenges. One is the plastic, the second is sustainable mining, is healthcare, and it is the energy transition. Those are the 4 areas that we work with on these, with these companies. And it's very practical, where we basically incubate projects that can lead to a significant difference in the country.
Why India?
Well, I find India as a fantastic country in many ways, but of course that's not why we are there. We are there because you have these major challenges. So if you are interested in air quality, you have to work on it in India. If you're interested in solving the plastic problem, you should work on it in India. If you're interested in water challenges, they are in India, they are not in Oslo, etc., etc. So that's why we are attracted, and we have been invited to work for some of the amazing Indian companies, and we are very excited about the progress, even though it is complex and it is not easy. But we are making progress.
Yeah, I wish you the best and good luck with that. And thank you very much for joining me today and answering my questions.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.